If you're starting from scratch with a garden, you can easily spend thousands of pounds on mature plants. In this video, I'll give you a bit of a more detailed overview of our garden makeover. I'll explain how we've managed to do it on a bit of a budget, how we've saved money by keeping as many mature plants as possible, and I'll also give you a few tips for planting up an entire garden without spending a fortune. Hiya folks, welcome back to the show. So last time I gave you a very quick kind of before and after look of what we've done to this garden over the last 18 months. And you know, with a garden like this, sometimes the only option is to start from scratch because you need to get all of the invasive plants out the road before you can really start planting anything that's worth planting. And if you're in a situation where you have to plant up a brand new garden from scratch, you'll quickly realise that if you do this via the big name garden centres, you could spend thousands of pounds on plants. So on the basis that we're probably about to enter the mother of all recessions, I figured I would show you how you can plant up a garden on a budget and how you can save a bit of money and even do a lot of your planting completely for free. Let's start by taking a look at what we did to our garden, why we designed it this way, and later on I'll tell you exactly how much this cost us. So to vaguely explain what we've done here, we've kind of divided the garden off into zones. We've got the decking zone right in front of us here, which as you can see, we haven't actually installed the decking yet. So that's a project for later on in this year once things have cooled down a little bit. We've then got the utilitarian zone here where kids can be out playing or we can have friends round, and this is generally where we'd just be kind of hanging out. We've then got the studio space over there and a little patch in front of it, just a kind of shady chill out zone in front. That does get full sun through the day, but I'm filming this quite early on because it's just such a gorgeous morning. But the whole garden gets sun at some point. So sunny mornings, having a cup of coffee on the decking, and then you get the evening sun towards the bottom of the garden down there. Past the studio space, we've then got another little chill out area here. Again, this gets full sun for most of the morning and early afternoon. So this is a really nice place to come and sit again, have lunch or whatever, and just chill out here in the sun if you wanted. Potential area for a veg patch over here, because again, that gets loads of sun over on that side and it's a bit of a redundant kind of space there. So it's quite a big area there for a veg patch. And then heading down towards the river, we have got our evening kind of chill out zone here. Again, you know, lovely on a hot day just to come and sit under the shade of the trees, under the canopy of the trees. We've kind of kept this area much more natural. We're not going over the top in terms of landscaping and stuff like that down here. We're really trying to keep it so that it transitions into the really, really natural part of stuff down here where you get to the river. River's really low at the minute because we are in the middle of a heat wave at the moment, so that's the lowest I've ever seen the river. But this whole area is a sanctuary for wildlife. You get all sorts. You get kingfishers, badgers, foxes, otters, squirrels, woodpeckers, and you even sometimes get deer hopping over the river and nibbling the grass at the end of the garden. Lots of leftover building materials which we do need to find a home for, but that's pretty low priority at the moment. But again, bit of a utilitarian area over here because this is generally always quite shady down this bottom section over here because the sun rises over on that side and it sets kind of over there-ish. Anyway, we'll head back up to the top and I'll show you kind of what we've done and our thinking behind stuff. We are not expert gardeners, as you've probably guessed, but you know, this is a family garden. We were very lucky with this property. We've always said we basically bought a garden that happened to have a house on it. It's what sold the property. Anyway, as I say, big decking area out the front. The decking will run at the same level as the internal floor level, straight out. So we've got a nice area to sit out here. That will then step out onto our new lawn here. I'll give you a bit of an update on the lawn later on. We've put trellis all the way down this side, so we've got a few climbers have started off, mainly clematis, but there's a few kind of rosy things that I'll show you in a moment as well. But it just means that we can basically disguise this whole fence over time. You'll not even see that fence in a couple of years' time. But over here, it was just totally overgrown with brambles, snowberries, and generally out of control plants, just plants that hadn't been maintained and they'd been left to their own devices, and as such the more invasive plants had taken over. So we ripped everything out and we cut everything back, and believe it or not, this we cut back to literally just a stump. And look at how it's doing. This is a lilac, and look what a gorgeous plant this is. And this will flower next year. And now that we've thinned everything out around it, it's got room to breathe. This has come back in, what, 3 months? All of this has appeared from nowhere, and it was never looking like that before. It was just a strangled mess. We will obviously be planting around it once the decking's all in, but we've kind of freed up a lot of space here, and we've got an idea of what's going on. We've got the rose spirea here, again, now has its own space. Before it was competing for space with about 100 other invasive plants. And by the way, this down here is what's left of our big birch tree, which we had a stump grinder guy come out and ground the stump away and left us with this wonderful mulch that we are using all around the garden as a bit of a weed suppressant. So we had, must have had about 15 wheelbarrows of that. And then over here, there was a great big sycamore tree growing. That had to go a journey. It was far too big for the location, too close to the studio room, too close to the house. So we figured we'd take it out now before it becomes a bigger job to take out. It was kind of just at the size where I could take it down myself with the chainsaw. Much bigger, we would have had to get a company out to do it. But we chopped the sycamore right down to the stump, and you can see it's already come back a lot. I mean, this is all growth from within the last, 4 months or something like that. So it's coming back with a vengeance, but I don't mind. We can keep that under control. But the other more interesting thing is the old dog rose. And the old dog rose, we cut this back to nothing. We cut it back to a stump, again, just to give it a chance to regrow from scratch. Very hardy plants, and you can get away with doing that anyway. And you can see how much of this has grown back already. It's already probably 5 foot tall, but I do need to make some sort of framework to hold this and try and persuade it to grow. Ow! But just to try and persuade it to grow more towards the trellis, because at the minute it's kind of all overhanging on the lawn side, and if anything we wanted to go that way. But we'll train that over time, not a particularly urgent thing. All the way down here we've planted a whole load of laurel and clematis and a bunch of other plants. I'm not going to name them all on here, but I'll try and list them all on the screen and how much we've paid. And by the way, that neatly brings us on to another point, which is on a garden of this size, you can easily spend several thousands of pounds on plants. If you go to the big garden centres, you will spend fortunes on plants trying to deck this out. But what we've done is we've really shopped around, and we've managed to find a few bargains. Morrison's were selling trees for £10 each, full trees. This is a cherry here. This is about, 4 foot tall cherry tree growing here. So that should be a nice location, just slightly out the road, but it'll give a bit of dappled shade in this area. Over on the other side, we have got a young plum tree here. This is now best part of 6 foot, beyond 6 foot tall. £10 from Morrison's. If you remember from previous videos, our neighbour's plum tree got quite badly damaged in the storms, and it's a very old tree that it does have plums on it actually, if you look closely. But yeah, we figured that plum tree's probably not got much life left in it. So we've planted a new little one down here, and 40 years time, it'll be the size of that great big old one. So how to save money when planting up a big garden? Well, first of all, avoid the big garden centres for a start. As far as I'm concerned, they're an absolute rip-off, and they're just money-making machines for big investment companies. Fine if you just want a cup of coffee and a bit of garden inspiration, but I can't remember the last time we bought a plant from one of the big names. If money is burning a hole in your pocket, then put it in the hands of some of the smaller independent nurseries instead. They'll often be much more open to doing a deal if you're buying a lot of plants, and sometimes they'll even give you plants for free if they're not in a good enough condition to sell. They can even help with garden design and tell you what to plant where. If you're ever in the northeast of England, have a drive out to Stanton Hall and see how it should be done. They close for the season on the 10th of September, so try and get out there before then. But even after that date, if you've got a lot of planting to do, you can get in touch with them directly and they will open the doors just specially for you. If you've got like a whole garden to do and they know that you're going to be spending quite a lot of money, they will help you through the whole process. So have a chat with them and see what they say. There's also loads of other really good independent garden centres and nurseries, and I'm sure there's some no matter where you live in the UK and the rest of the world as well. So give them your custom instead of the big chain stores. Having said that, if your budgets are tight, I've already mentioned about the trees that we got from Morrison's, £10 each versus best part of £40 each if we'd gone to the big garden centres. Wicks of all places had bedding plants like these for 30p each, and slightly bigger plants such as fuchsias from, I think it was about £2 each. Home Bargains had fuchsias for £1.50 each and lavenders from £3 each. And I'm not a big fan of buying plants from supermarkets because they do tend to squeeze the suppliers a lot. But at the same time, if you're out there anyway, sometimes you can pick up some real bargains, especially towards the end of the season when they might have a lot of stuff on clearance. If you're happy doing some planting over winter time, consider bare root plants. Bare root plants can save you a fortune. We got a bunch from Best for Hedging for £1.09 each. Admittedly, some of the ewes didn't take, but at that kind of price, who cares? It's also worth looking out for their end of season sales as well. Around kind of mid-April time, they'll get rid of a lot of their bare root plants because it's too late in the season. And this year they were doing random plant selections. I think it was 100 at a time, but it worked out at about 50p per plant. So even if only half of them take, it's still way cheaper than going to the big garden centres. Another thing to look out for is end of season bargains at DIY stores. I've seen plants literally being put in the bin at the end of the season because they don't know what to do with them. So have a drive by late on, you know, ask the management if they've got any plants that they're getting rid of. Just obviously make sure you're not taking annuals because they won't come back to life next year. The very best thing you can do though is to make your own plants by taking cuttings. We'll be doing that very shortly with lavender and rosemary, since they're two plants that we can't get enough of. They'll take longer to grow, but you have the satisfaction of growing them from scratch, and of course they won't cost you a penny. Just chop off some new growth, cut the stem just below a leaf joint, strip the leaves back a bit, and shove them towards the edge of a pot. Give them a bit of water and away you go. Yes, there are better ways of doing this, but even if only 50% of them take, you'll still have more plants than you know what to do with. But yeah, a lot of these young plants, you know, these will grow quickly. If you want to put big mature plants in and spend £50 per plant because you've got money to burn, then fine, do that. But you'd be amazed. You buy these little plants for like £2 or £3 each. Within a year to 2 years, they will be huge. These are going to be happy little plants. There is the odd little plant that's not that happy, and I'm not entirely sure why. We did buy a bunch of bare root plants because again they're ultra cheap, and we got a few English yews and some of them have taken fine. So this one is, you can see new growth all over it, but then we've got a few here. This one hasn't got long left to live. This one doesn't seem to have taken at all. I'm not entirely sure why, but We'll leave it there. It might come back to life, but I very, very much doubt it. I think maybe we were just a little bit late in the season for planting bare root plants, but such is life. They were only £2 or £3 each, so it's not the end of the world. Lots of fuchsias. Again, they look tiny at the minute, but that'll turn into a massive bush. That'll fill out this whole section in a couple of years' time. You wouldn't believe it. We'll come back to that. Make sure you subscribe and I'll give you an update every year as to how this garden's going. The main priority this year was just getting the structural plants in, getting all the back big plants, the yews, the laurels, and a few of the other things that are just going to disguise this fence over time. And then later on we can just bring this border out slightly, put some smaller plants at the bottom there, but no rush to do that. Down here we've got a little bit of pyracantha growing along this edge. The plan was to kind of let that grow up to disguise the shed, but it's struggling a little bit with it being in the lawn. That's a job I need to sort out. Maybe put some trellis up behind it, give it something to grow against. And I'll just very quickly show you down the bottom here. One of my favourite plants of all time is a rhododendron, and we've managed to get 2 rhododendrons planted. One over here, this one is showing good signs, got new growth on it. The other one over this side, a little bit concerned about. I'm hoping it comes back to life, but yeah, it's maybe we're in too shady a spot, I'm not sure. It doesn't look as happy. Rhododendrons like acidic soil, and I haven't done a soil test. It could just be that it doesn't like the soil, or it might just come through. We shall see. I'm not getting stressed about it. If it survives, it survives. If it doesn't, well, such is life. As I say, we're in the more natural part of the garden here anyway. In the springtime, this is all full of bluebells and cow parsley, and then as the seasons move on, the snowberries start to come through a little bit more as well. You can see the snowberries. I'm filming this kind of mid-August, and the snowberries are just starting to come through, the little white berries on these plants. Then very quickly heading up this side, it looks a bit of a mess, but it's not. It will sort itself out over time. This area, raspberries, which were already in. Again, heavily cut the raspberries back, but I think these will fruit next year. So all the growth that we've got here has only just come through this year, but we should get some nice raspberries from those next year, hopefully. Got some brambles growing at the back there as well, and as I say, this is probably going to be the area where we'll put a veg plot anyway. And then coming up here, we've got a blueberry plant that we planted. We've got another English yew, which this one's taken fine, but again, there was another one next to it that died quite early on. And then over on this side, more fuchsias. Those will bunch out and fill out this whole area here. And we've got a peony that was growing in the middle of the lawn, and we transplanted it over here, and it seems much, much happier now. Then finally, coming back up the garden, side of the studio, again, one of my favourite plants, lavender. Got lavender growing up here. I'm going to be taking lots of lavender and rosemary cuttings to grow many, many of those for all around the garden, because they are great plants for bunching out, especially rosemary. Rosemary can grow in great big bushes. Lavender, if you don't keep on top of it and trim it back every year, it can get very leggy over time. So for example, that is an old lavender that hasn't been pruned back, and that's what it ends up looking like. It's a bit ugly if you don't keep on top of it, but it is one of my favourite plants. Very easy to take cuttings and grow your own new lavender plants. So these ones that I took earlier in the year will pot out, and we'll take a whole load more cuttings before the year is out. And then again, in front of the studio room, just to disguise this great big kind of area of wood, we got a few wild cherry plants, and those they were half that size when we planted them, and they're already nearly 7 foot tall, maybe taller. Again, we've got daisy bushes. We've got one daisy bush that got a bit of a hammering from lack of rain, but it is coming back, so I think it'll be all right. But that side of it's a bit dead. I should probably just maybe cut that away. I'll leave it for now, see what it does, but it's not completely dead. Again, this will all bush out over time. It'll disguise all the edges of the lawn. We still need to do stuff up this side. We still need to put a little path down this end so that you can get connected up to the path that goes past the studio room. And then finally, our pride and joy is the azalea. And this azalea tree that we kept, again, we've kept everything that we could keep in this garden, but this is a gorgeous plant. It flowers, it's the first plant to flower in the garden really early on, gets these like fluorescent red flowers on it. Quite an interesting plant because it flowers before the leaves appear, which is the only plant I've seen do that. I'm sure there must be other ones, but yeah, these fluorescent red flowers appear and then they drop and then the leaves come out. And yes, so glad we kept that. I mean, you would be spending fortunes on a mature azalea plant like that. The leftover crocosmia, because crocosmia can be quite invasive, we've put in a pot. That's just starting to come into flower. And in terms of random things that just grow and turn out to be quite nice, we've got a rose just popped up down the bottom here, and we'll leave that there. It's not causing any harm. I know some of you were quite keen to see the garden basically left in a completely natural state, but you can't do that. That's not a responsible way of gardening, because what happens is that you get invasive plants taking over, and that's what was happening here. We've got a major problem with bindweed. Everywhere you go, you've got bindweed trying to take over. We've got snowberries that are taking over if you don't keep them under control. Brambles were literally everywhere, and you end up with a garden just filled with invasive plants, and all the nice plants just can't compete, and you have to help out the nice plants, and that means getting back to a bit of a blank canvas. That's what we're at the minute. And once all these plants down this side start to mature, as I say, you'll not really see that fence anymore. It'll all start to look a bit more like a garden. But if you want to see what it's going to look like over the years, do hit the subscribe button, because I'm going to come back every year and show you what this garden's doing. And of course, there'll be little updates throughout the year as well on specific projects and things as well. Like the lawn, which we planted, 2 months ago or something like that, reseeded it, and we made the video about it. It's doing all right. I'm going to give it a feed, but I wanted to show you in this state first. We've got, I noticed these little kind of dark green patches growing through, and unfortunately what these little green patches are is horsetail growing through the grass, and horsetail's a bit of a nightmare. Let's just see if I can pull a bit off and show you. So that's horsetail. It's an invasive weed, and it will completely take over. But hopefully, if it's in the grass like this and we keep on top of the cutting and we feed the lawn well, hopefully it'll die out. But there are little patches of that coming through. Again, this would have just been in the soil, and we did leave the grass for quite a long time before planting the new seed, and there was no sign of anything coming through. But yeah, that's all horsetail, unfortunately. That's it there, growing where the decking's going to be going. So yeah, it's an ancient plant, by the way. It's like prehistoric plant. It's been around for certainly longer than you or I. The grass on the whole's looking great. I haven't really done much with it other than cutting it and watering it. Luckily, we haven't been affected too much by the heat wave up here. I mean, it's warm, don't get us wrong, it's warm, but we've got plenty of water, and Kielder Reservoir is just up the road, so luckily we're in a position where the water board's actually prepared in advance for not having enough water in England. I have sprayed some wetting agent onto the grass just to help the water that we do put on get used as efficiently as possible. Again, Daniel Hibbett's done some great videos about all of this sort of stuff, so I'm no expert on that. We are going to feed it and spray it with seaweed as well, but at the minute the weather's just far too hot. As I say, we're in our second heat wave of the year, and there's no point in putting that down quite yet. We just need to leave it a couple of days, let the weather chill out a little bit. This is the stuff I'm going to be using, so I've never used this before, so fingers crossed, hence making this video now before I actually destroy our lawn. Once again, hit subscribe and I'll give you a little bit of an update later down the line on how that went. So folks, I hope you found that useful. And by the way, a couple of people mentioned about our lawn being green as opposed to yellow. I know a lot of people have been suffering drought problems in the UK, which is just, brain does not compute. Anyway, in the northeast, we built Kielder Reservoir in 1982. We have something like 200 billion litres of water. We had a little trip up there the other day. I can confirm we have no water shortage problems in the northeast. I would suggest you get onto your water companies and tell them maybe to store some of the immense amount of water that seems to land in the UK every year. I know farmers have got a bit of a problem, but there's no excuse for hosepipe bans. That just makes no sense. But I guess while people are prepared to go along with it, why bother building reservoirs? Anyway, now that we're past the heat of summer, we're going to be planting out a lot more stuff in the beds just to fill things out a little bit more now that a lot of the structural planting is already in. If we've saved you a little bit of money by watching this video, then do consider joining the member zone, and there's loads of extra stuff on there that'll hopefully help you out. And by the way, a few people were asking how the renovation's going. It's nearly done. We're waiting on worktops for the kitchen basically. But if you want to see what the bedroom looks like, the brand new bedroom as part of the extension, there's kind of a bit of a reveal over on the member zone. I will be doing that on this public channel as well at some point, but again, as per usual, massive backlog of videos, and we're going to be getting back to some of those projects next time, so don't forget to hit subscribe. But yes, do come and join us on the member zone because it is direct support for the channel. As per usual, a massive thank you to everyone who supported the channel over there over time. You can get access to it all for around the price of a cup of coffee. We don't make sponsored videos on this channel, so it genuinely helps to keep this show on the road. Just visit members.gosforthhandyman.com, link down below. For now folks, as per usual, be nice to one another, look after each other, and we shall see you next time. Tatty bye.